Welcome to 1189, an online Bible commentary. My name is Tyler Marston, and today we're taking a look at the last chapter in Matthew, chapter 28. Untold grief and tragedy are filling the hearts of Jesus' disciples at this moment. Jesus was innocently executed by an angry mob in a complete perversion of justice. And this is threatening to the disciples' way of life. They gave up everything they had to follow his messianic campaign. They've lost the leader who promised to save them. They've lost the teacher who revealed God's mysteries to them. And they've lost a friend who humbled himself to serve them. In the back of their mind, they might be recalling some of Jesus' offhanded ramblings about a resurrection after his death in chapters 16, 20, and 26. But how could such a shameful and humiliating defeat really usher in God's new creation? And how could Jesus be the promised king when his only crown was made of thorns? It all comes in what happens next. Now after the Sabbath, as it began to dawn toward the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary came to look at the grave. And behold, a severe earthquake had occurred, for an angel of the Lord descended from heaven and came and rolled away the stone and sat on it. And his appearance was like lightning, his clothing as white as snow. The guards shook for fear of him and became like dead men. It was early on a Sunday morning, the third day after a new normal, life after Jesus had been executed. Some of the women among Jesus' disciples had come to his grave to mourn his death. And they find an earthquake has happened. The Roman guards are passed out on the ground. And a figure right out of Daniel 7 with blinding white garments is sitting on top of the stone that's been rolled away. What is going on? The angel said to the women, "Do not be afraid, for I know that you are looking for Jesus who has been crucified. He is not here, for he is risen, just as he said. Come, see the place where he was lying. Go quickly and tell his disciples that he is risen from the dead. And behold, he's going ahead of you into Galilee. There you will see him. Behold, I have told you." And they left the tomb quickly with fear and great joy, and ran to report it to his disciples. The angel gives his message of encouragement and tells the women that Jesus is alive and waiting on them in Galilee, just like he said he would back in chapter 26. Naturally, the women run to the disciples and tell them everything they've seen and heard. I mean, could this actually be true? And behold, Jesus met them and greeted them. And they came up and took hold of his feet and worshipped him. Then Jesus said to them, "Do not be afraid. Go and take word to my brethren and leave for Galilee, and there they will see me." Now surely all the disciples would have been freaking out. Some of them probably think that those women were just hysterical with grief. And that's when Jesus appears to them, bodily, in the flesh. They worship him. It's the only natural response to something like this. He tells them to spread the word and meet back up in Galilee. Now while they were on their way, some of the guard came into the city and reported to the chief priests all that had happened. And when they had assembled with the elders and consulted together, they gave a large sum of money to the soldiers, and said, "You are to say his disciples came by night and stole him away while we were asleep. And if this should come to the governor's ears, we will win him over and keep you out of trouble." And they took the money, and did as they had been instructed. And this story was widely spread among the Jews, and is to this day. A popular defense for a historical empty tomb is the inclusion of this story. This whole gospel is written to convince people that Jesus really was the Messiah and that he really did rise from the dead. Why would he even entertain the idea that the disciples stole the body? Unless it really was a theory that was going around during this time. Unless it really was something people were saying. Which would mean there really was an empty tomb. And people really did have to come up with answers about what that meant. Now Matthew claims that this theory that the disciples stole the body must have come about from collusion between the Roman guards and the chief priests, both of whom had major incentive to make sure that the story of Jesus being resurrected didn't spread. The priests pay off the guards and get them to say that the disciples really did steal the body. But the 11 disciples proceeded to Galilee, to the mountain which Jesus had designated. When they saw him, they worshipped him, but some were doubtful. Matthew ends his gospel with Jesus appearing on a mountain in Galilee to the disciples. And like the mountain from the Sermon on the Mount or from the Transfiguration, we should be recalling Mount Sinai to mind. The disciples are meeting with the bodily resurrected presence of God, and they're receiving instruction that will change their lives and the course of history forever. Now, Matthew does mention that some of the disciples continue to doubt Jesus' resurrection. He's not very clear on who or why or for how long, because he's much more focused on Jesus' actual message to his disciples. He presents it as a climactic choice that each of his readers will have to make for themselves, the same way that the disciples here have to make a choice in whether they believe in the resurrection or not. And Jesus came up and spoke to them, saying, "All authority has been given to me in heaven and on earth. Go therefore, and make disciples of all the nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I have commanded you. And lo, I am with you always, even to the end of the age." First, Jesus says he's been given all authority. And this is important, considering how the theme of questioning Jesus' authority has played out through the rest of Matthew's Gospel. And it fulfills Daniel 7, where the Son of Man gets a throne from God and gets authority over all the heavens and all the earth. Second, Jesus gives all of his disciples the command to go to every nation and tell them the message about his resurrection, so that people all over the world would know that the kingdom of heaven is here and now through the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus, the Messiah. Finally, Jesus ends his message, and Matthew his gospel, with a promise that Jesus will be with them until the end of the age. Now, Matthew ends his account right here. It's a rhetorical reminder that Jesus still has all authority over all of heaven and all the earth. We are still to be preaching the message of his resurrection all over the world, and that Jesus is still with us always, even now through his Spirit that lives inside of us. And that is the gospel according to Matthew. Matthew's abrupt ending leaves people in a tension to have to answer two questions. Do you believe this gospel? And if you do, what are you going to do about it? Thanks for watching 1189. I hope you have a good day, and God bless.